So, today we're going to talk about exercising and working out and being active and so on and so forth, and the evolutionary perspective behind it. Whether it is actually, maybe necessary or medicine, as this file, I would say, says. This might not be the most innovative thing to do right now because Greg Doucette, very, very recently, I think it's actually been today, as of the 16th of March, published a video about the exact same thing, but I've actually found some more lengthy PDF from Harvard and also from the same author about the same thing, apparently, and it sounds very interesting because it says, or it's headlined or titled, "Is exercise really medicine? An evolutionary perspective?" And it's very interesting to me. I'm exercising every single day, and it is actually a crucial part of my everyday life because it actually makes me pretty happy, and yeah, it's just a part of what I'm doing. Anyway, by Daniel E. Lieberman, PhD. Abstract. An evolutionary perspective helps evaluate the extent to which exercise is medicine and to explain the exercise paradox. Why people tend to avoid exercise despite its benefits. Many lines of evidence indicate that humans evolved to be adapted for regular, moderate amounts of endurance physical activity into late age. However, because energy from food was limited, humans also were selected to avoid unnecessary exertion, and most anatomical and physiological systems evolved to require stimuli from physical activity to adjust capacity to demand. Consequently, selection never operated to cope with the long-term effects of chronic inactivity. However, because all adaptations involve trade-offs, there is no evolutionary determined dose or type of physical activity that will optimize health. Furthermore, because humans evolved to be active for play or necessity, efforts to promote exercise will require altering environments in ways that nudge or even compel people to be active and to make exercise fun. I do not really want to go that deep into the abstract right now because I think that the article is anyway talking about it, and when it is time, then I can add my thoughts. Introduction. If you're reading this article, you almost certainly know the compelling evidence that physical activity is a vital means of preventing morbidity and mortality. You also are well aware of the scale of the obesity and physical inactivity epidemics in developed nations such as the United States and their rapid increase through much of the developing world. Also, you know that decades of efforts to encourage the public to undertake the modicum of physical activity prescribed as a minimum by the American College of Sports Medicine and the Surgeon General, just 150 minutes per week, have had only modest effects. Too many people indulge their instincts to take it easy whenever possible and to eat a surfeit of highly processed, obesogenic foods. These tendencies, in conjunction with recent technologies that make it possible for billions of people to actually eat and act as they wish, have led to a worldwide rise in avoidable, chronic, non-infectious diseases that have become the dominant cause of morbidity and mortality in the developed world. By the way, there's also sources to all those claims. I would highly recommend you to check out this article. The link is going to be down in the description. But why? Why do so many people fail to act in their own self-interest, at least in terms of promoting good health? Why is exercise actually necessary for health, and what explains the exercise paradox? Most people avoid exercise even though physical activity is vital for health. As Theodosius Dobzhansky famously wrote more than 40 years ago, "Nothing in biology makes sense except in the light of evolution." By this, Dobzhansky meant that although fields such as genetics, molecular biology, and physiology are necessary to explain the proximate mechanisms, like how questions, that are immediately responsible for biological phenomena, only evolutionary theory and data can explain the ultimate mechanisms, why questions, that provide deeper explanations of a phenomenon's true and underlying causes. Simple put, since all living things evolved rather than were designed, it is necessary to consider an organism's evolutionary history to understand why it is the way it is. Evolution thus provides the only scientific explanation for why humans have teeth and big brains and walk on two legs. I therefore would add a corollary to Dobzhansky's famous sentence to state that nothing in biology, including the obesity and inactivity epidemic, makes sense except in the light of evolution. This article therefore uses an evolutionary perspective to ask 3 questions about the exercise paradox. First, how much and what kinds of physical activity are humans adapted for? Second, to what extent are humans also adapted to be physically inactive? And third, how is information on the evolution of human physical activity and inactivity relevant to addressing the exercise paradox? My argument is that although evolutionary history especially adapted humans, especially adapted humans to be endurance athletes. We are just as adapted to be physically inactive. Furthermore, because natural selection acts only on reproductive success by favoring adaptations that trade off energy between activity and reproduction, there is no evolutionary determined dose or type of physical activity that will optimize health. To make this argument, I begin with a brief review of how to apply evolutionary data and theory to problems of health and disease, focusing on the thorny concept of adaptation. I then review the evidence for humans' physical activity and inactivity and conclude with thoughts about how an evolutionary perspective applies to ameliorating the inactivity pandemic, or epidemic, not pandemic. Too many pandemics going on in my head. Well, I do want to point something out or reread something. Furthermore, because natural selection acts only on reproductive success by favoring adaptations that trade off energy between activity and reproduction, there is no evolutionary determined dose or type of physical activity that will optimize health. That being said, that doesn't mean that you shouldn't exercise. That doesn't mean that you should be laying around all day long and do nothing. No, this is not what it means. But back in the days, apparently, at least as how I'm understanding it, and I could be totally wrong there, people were not able to be successful when it comes to reproduction when they moved more. Quite the opposite. I mean, if you think about ancient times, evolutionary perspective of reproduction, then if you really moved a lot, and therefore haven't had a lot of energy, then probably you would not also have had the energy to reproduce yourself and all have sex, So in that sense, yes. But as I'm thinking about it, and as I'm thinking about things in these times, in the present, then I would actually say that physical activity and being in good shape could actually definitely help you reproduce. Because, if I don't know the data. I don't know if there even is data. But people that exercise and people that are physically active on a regular basis, I would say most often are indeed looking a bit better. And because of that, the chances of reproduction are, at least in my point of view, higher. So maybe things changed, maybe things changed from, okay, I am overweight and this is actually fine and pretty good even, to, okay, I am overweight and nobody wants me. Quite. I could be wrong there as well. As I said, I don't have any data. This is just some thoughts. Anyway, evolution and health. Doctors and patients rarely consider evolutionary biology relevant to medicine, and sadly, the most common perceptions of how to apply evolution to issues of health and disease are the paleo diet and fitness movements. These movements encompass diverse opinions and practices, but their essential underlying logic is that since we evolved to live and eat in Stone Age conditions, then living and eating like a hunter-gatherer is likely to promote good health. Although there is a kernel of truth to this argument, many medical professionals and patients are justifiably skeptical of superficial claims that eating and acting like a hunter-gatherer is the key to lowering morbidity and mortality. Such simplistic prescriptions are contradicted not only by evolutionary theory but also by evolutionary data. Most importantly, it is wrong to assume that adaptations promote health. As discussed in the following section, adaptations evolve only if they increase reproductive success, the number of offspring that survive and reproduce. Therefore, even if humans are adapted to Paleolithic lifestyles, it does not follow that foods and behaviors that are ancient, for example raw meat and hunting mammoths, necessarily promote health, or those that are modern, for example yogurt and cycling, are unhealthy. Second, Paleolithic lifestyles were highly varied, making it impossible to define a single Paleolithic diet or behavior to follow. Finally, evolution did not stop in the Paleolithic, but actually intensified during the farming era and continues to the present day. That said, there is not much useful information to be gleaned about health from evolutionary history and theory, which has given rise to the nascent field of evolutionary medicine. One of the first thinkers to relate evolution to health was actually Charles Darwin's grandfather, the physician Erasmus Darwin, whose 1794 book Zoonomia endeavored to relate an evolutionary view of comparative anatomy and physiology to disease and influenced his grandson's theory of natural selection. Charles Darwin, however, did not extend his theory to medicine, and it was not until Nessa and Williams' groundbreaking 1995 book, Why We Get Sick, that the medical implications of evolutionary biology really took off. Since then, a growing number of researchers have been applying evolutionary theory and data to many different aspects of health and disease, often with surprising implications. At the heart of almost all efforts to apply evolutionary theory and data to health issues such as the exercise paradox is the theory of natural selection and the concept of adaptation. To briefly review, natural selection derives from the following three uncontroversial phenomena. First, all organisms vary. Second, some of these variations are genetically heritable. And third, organisms compete for resources, leading to differential reproductive success. As Darwin, Wallace, and others have since shown, the emergent outcome of these three phenomena is a special kind of change over time. Natural selection, in which heritable features that increase or decrease an organism's chance of having more offspring generations. Among the many concepts that derive from this profound insight, the most important is adaptation, defined normally as a novel feature shaped by natural selection which improves an organism's ability to survive and reproduce. For example, a ton of hedgehogs died because they were too slow and they were run over by cars. Because they died, the genes of faster hedgehogs got reproduced. All those that were fast survived, because they were faster than the cars were. Back in the days, maybe nowadays as well. And therefore, this is natural selection. Those hedgehogs which were faster got selected to reproduce. And therefore, hedgehogs got faster because it was necessary, for surviving. But also for, surviving. And therefore also for having offspring, because if you don't survive, you're probably not going to have that much offspring. Anyway. Natural selection favors the evolution of adaptations and selects against features that are maladaptive. However, over a century of research has shown that the concept of adaptation is actually complex and hard to test. Although adaptations are important and abundant, not all features are adaptations. They are often highly context dependent. For example, features may be adaptive in some environments but not in others. They often conflict with each other, and adaptations promote health only to the extent that health promotes reproductive success. To apply and test the concept of adaptation to the exercise paradox, it is first necessary to consider what kinds of physical activity and inactivity humans are actually adapted for. So what kinds, should I actually go through that? how long have I been recording for? 15 minutes. Well, I actually don't want to stop, but I kind of need to, so I'm going to see you the next time. Bye-bye.